Good morning to each of you, wherever you are, whoever you are. Welcome to worship with the Unitarian Universalist community of Charlotte. I'm Jay Leach, one of the ministers of this congregation. Thank you for joining us today. We come together this way each week to examine with greater honesty our individual lives and to name with greater clarity what we hold most dear. To find, even in this virtual way, a community that can hold us and that can hold us accountable. If you notice the slide that opened this service, the first of several today, featuring the remarkable art of the remarkable Polish abstract artist Władysław Stremiński. You may have noticed that along with his art, there appeared the title of this service. All are responsible. A service in the spirit of Yom Kippur. Unitarian Universalism is a religious tradition that honors the wisdom that we find in other religious traditions, including, as we name explicitly in our sources, Jewish teachings. Today, aware that our Jewish neighbors have been immersed in their highest of holy days, we invoke their spirit, that spirit, into our service, the spirit today of Yom Kippur. It reminds us that Jews begin their new year introspectively, examining their lives and making amends, seeking forgiveness from those they have wronged. Today's service in that spirit takes courage. Courage to offer it and courage to open ourselves to it. It may make you as uncomfortable as it does me. You see, I know how to call out injustice, to name the ways right-wing politicians and their right-wing supporters, egged on by the right-wing media, are at fault. To name how policing and our carceral system are broken and need to be defunded. To name the ills of corporate America and capitalism and the fossil fuel industry and the two-party system and The list goes on and on. But today is not about that. It's not about calling out all of those others. Today is about, as that late king of pop put it, looking at the man, the woman, the person in the mirror. It's about asking them, asking her, asking him to make a change. Today is about each of us taking one more step and then another toward our better selves. We'll sing it together now, during which time you may wish to go to our public Facebook page and post greetings to one another. It is good to be together again.
May this flame, symbol of transformation since time began, fire our curiosity, strengthen our wills, and sustain our courage as we seek what is good within and around us.
I want to add a special welcome to our children and youth, however you are tuning in, whatever device you're using, phone, laptop, tablet, TV, wherever you're sitting, your couch, kitchen stool. I'm so glad that you could be with us for the first part of the service this morning. This is what we do on fourth Sundays. There's a portion of the service during which we speak directly to you, our children and youth, before you leave for now your virtual classes. I'm going to start with a story. Once when I was a kid, my parents left my sister and I with our beloved babysitter, Heather. Heather was the kind of babysitter who gave us her full attention as soon as our parents had left. She didn't spend the time catching up on her favorite TV shows, or these days, maybe you'd say scrolling endlessly on her phone rather than playing with us. Heather was just there, ready to do what we wanted to do. And we liked to make up really goofy games and explain them to her, and she'd play them with us. Well, this one night, relatively for the things we did, not that wild, we decided to play indoor freeze tag. So we were having such a great time running from room to room until I ran through the kitchen and tried to dodge the kitchen table to not get tagged. But I hit the table, and on the table was my mom's favorite mug. It was this pottery, this ceramic mug that her college roommate had made, and she drank her coffee out of it every morning. And I bumped the table, and that mug, the mug my mom would hold, and whenever she held it would say, I wonder what Diana, her college roommate, I wonder what she's up to. It fell and it shattered. Pieces went everywhere. And I just started crying. I so badly wanted to run away or hide before my parents got home. I dreaded how sad this news would make my mom, and I just didn't want to tell her. But our babysitter, Heather, held me while I cried. And then she said, it's okay. All you can do is do what you can to make it right. So I picked up the biggest pieces of the mug and I put them in a bag and left it on the table. And then I swept up all the little tiny pieces that we were never going to be able to use to repair it, and swept them and threw them away so they didn't cut anybody's foot when they were walking by. And when Mom came home, I somehow resisted the urge to run away or to hide. I took a deep breath and I told her I was running too fast. I bumped the kitchen table and I broke the mug Diana made you. My mom was sad, disappointed even, and she forgave me. She said I could do better in the future by not running so fast in the house, by being more careful, more aware of my surroundings, but she forgave me. This evening begins the Jewish high holy day, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Atonement, which means doing what is in our power to make it right. Our mistakes, the times we hurt others accidentally or on purpose. Yom Kippur is about doing what's in our power to make it right. Yom Kippur is a 25-hour period when Jews fast and pray and ask God for forgiveness with all their hearts. But of course, there's a lot more to it than that. Atonement doesn't just mean saying, I'm sorry, or asking someone's forgiveness. It means changing something about ourselves, changing our own behavior. Atonement means taking responsibility for what we've done and doing what we can to make things right. Judaism teaches that no matter how carefully one fasts, how heartfelt their prayers during Yom Kippur, there are some things God can't forgive. Actually, the better way to put it is that there are some things that are not God's to forgive. Judaism teaches that if we have harmed a fellow human being who can forgive us, then we must go to the person we've hurt, do what we can to right our wrong, and ask for their forgiveness, not God's. Let us learn from the wisdom of our Jewish neighbors who make it a spiritual practice to face their mistakes and wrongdoing with intention. When it's scary, when it's hard, they ask, what harm have I done to others? And what can I do? What is in my power? How can I take responsibility to make it right?
The words of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Associate Justice, Supreme Court of the United States, New York Historical Society, April the 10th, 2018. After the words, "We the people of the United States," the Constitution sets out the aspiration to form a more perfect union. At the start, it is true, the Union very much needed perfection. The original Constitution permitted slavery and severely limited who counted among we the people. When the nation was new, only white property-owning men had the right to vote, the most basic right of citizenship. But over the course of our history, people left out at the start, people held in human bondage, Native Americans, and women who made up half of the population came to be embraced as full citizens. Though we have made huge progress, the work of perfection is scarcely done. Many stains remain. In this rich land, nearly a quarter of our children live in deep poverty. Nearly half of our citizens do not vote, and still struggle to achieve greater understanding and appreciation of each other across racial, religious, and socioeconomical lines. Yet, we strive to realize the ideal, to become a more perfect union. I would like to convey to you, finally, how a great American jurist, Judge Learned Hand, understood liberty. He explained in 1944 what liberty meant to him when he greeted a large assemblage of new Americans gathered in Central Park to swear allegiance to the United States. These are Judge Hand's words. Just what is this sacred liberty that must lie in the hearts of men and women? It is not the ruthless, the unbridled will. It is not freedom to do as one likes. I cannot define the spirit of liberty. I can only tell you my own faith. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which is not too sure that is right. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which seeks to understand the minds of other men and women. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which weighs their interest alongside its own bias. May the spirit of liberty, as Judge Hand explained it, be our beacon. May you have the conscience and courage to act in accord with that high ideal as you play your part in helping achieve a more perfect union.
Years ago in Houston, then as now our nation's fourth largest city and one of its most racially diverse, I led a clergy coalition as part of an organization called Interfaith Ministries for Greater Houston. It was an extraordinary group made up of Catholics, quite a few stripes and strands of Protestants, conservative and Reform Jews, along with representatives from the Baha'i, Hindu, Muslim, and Unitarian Universalist communities. We became a close-knit group, aiming for and often actually embodying our highest common values, attending more to what we shared together than to where we disagreed. As we explored how we might be more of a presence in the larger community, we decided to try to replicate something I'd learned about from a clergy friend in Oakland. We would go to sites of recent acts of violence and would pray there together as a group. So, week after week, we assembled on sidewalks and street corners, in parks and parking lots, in front of houses, apartments, buildings, businesses, in impoverished, moderate, middle class, and wealthy neighborhoods where some act of violence had occurred. And there, we'd pray. Amazingly, we each agreed that for all of the variations and varieties in our prayers, there would be one element that would be a part of every gathering. At some point, no matter the leader or the religious tradition from which they came, no matter the nature of the violent act or the number of people involved in it, at some point, we would offer a prayer of confession. In this particular prayer, gathering after gathering, we would consciously, explicitly acknowledge that each of us, that all of us as a group, that in fact the whole larger community shared in the responsibility for what had occurred there. One August weekend in 1970, Margaret Mead, then an almost 70-year-old celebrated anthropologist, and James Baldwin, though still in his mid-40s, one of the best-known poets in the world, engaged in dialogue on a public stage in New York City. Over long hours, they discussed an array of concerns, their discourse eventually published under the too narrow title, A Rap on Race. One of their most intense exchanges came when they reflected on their shared sorrow about the bombing of the Birmingham church in which 4 little black girls died. Baldwin, to Mead's consternation, made a very surprising statement. He accepted responsibility for that tragic event. Mead asked, "Did you bomb those little girls in Birmingham?" To which Baldwin replied, "I'm responsible for it. I didn't stop it. I didn't drop the bomb. I've never lynched anybody. Yet I am responsible." Mead protests that she will not accept responsibility for what other people do. To which Baldwin responds, "I'm an American citizen, and the crimes of this republic, whether or not I am guilty of them, I am responsible for." Now, were we together, as we have been on Yom Kippur services in years past, you in our long wooden pews, me in the pulpit up front, I can imagine that some of you might look confused at this point. Some might be shifting uneasily in your seats. Maybe some of you would even be a bit upset. What do these two odd accounts mean? Why would a group of clergy people in our prayers at a site of an act of violence, an act for which none of us were guilty, why would we confess, name ourselves as sharing in the responsibility for the tragedy that had transpired there? Why would James Baldwin, one of the fiercest, most unyielding critics this nation has ever known, claim on a public stage that he not only shares responsibility for the bombing of a Birmingham church and the murder there of 4 little girls, but for, as he said, the crimes of this republic? Both the clergy's prayers and the poet's claim occupy that moral, spiritual territory about which Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote. Though published in 1972, Heschel's words have resonance in our times. There is, he recognized, there is immense silent agony in the world. He names explicitly suffering, evil, indifference to evil, before writing those powerful words. In a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible. Some are guilty, but all are responsible. It is a profoundly spiritual claim, one that requires such spiritual courage to even begin to really hear. How much easier to focus on our rights, and frankly, on how we are right, than on our responsibility. How much easier to attend to what they have done wrong and are doing wrong. How much easier to rail against the injustices perpetuated by others, by the ones we know and name as guilty. Alas, that's not the focus of Yom Kippur, or of Heschel's words, or of those genuinely interested in the discovery of deep spiritual meaning. These ask us to ask ourselves, not did we do it, but rather, how are we responsible? And more importantly still, what is our response? We could, of course, as many do, grant ourselves absolution for all of the brokenness in the world for which we can rightly claim we did not directly cause. But to live in the fullness of our humanity, according to Heschel, is to account not just for fault and guilt, but also for responsibility. We're all born into a broken world, a world of immense agony, as Heschel puts it. We were all either born in or arrived in this agonizingly broken nation, so far always from the high ideals that we profess. The excerpt from that speech from the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg that Cindy read earlier. We heard her admission about the serious flaws at our nation's founding and her further admission that many stains remain. Do they ever? We could say, as many obviously do, I never did those things. No one in my family ever did those things. I am not, we are not guilty. However, the probing question, moral, spiritual question is less who is guilty than it is who will take responsibility now. Isn't that what Ginsburg was commending when she urged her hearers in that speech? May you have the conscience and the courage to act in accord with our high ideals as you play your part in helping to achieve a more perfect union. It's the courage of recognizing and accepting responsibility. So too, we were all born into families that were broken, families already marked and marred by patterns, often generations in the making, for we are simply, though there's really nothing simple about it, for which we are simply the inheritors. I didn't, for example, choose the patriarchy modeled for me by strong and capable and loving and good and patriarchal grandfathers and father. And truth be told, they didn't choose it either. So simply having come into this, a part of what it meant to be born at the meeting point of two families steeped in patriarchy, shall I simply wash my hands of it? Declare it to be not of my making and thus none of my responsibility? The Hebrew notion of tikkun olam, repair of the world, has a long and complex history within Judaism, as some of you from that tradition know. Especially for Reform, progressive Jews, it has come to mean that we humans are the repairers. That it is to us to engage in repairing the world. That the world can only be healed when there are those of us willing to accept responsibility for its healing. May we be counted among the responsible ones, those responsible for the healing of this world. Rabbi Sharon Brous is a 40-something-year-old leader of a creative young congregation in Los Angeles. She's regarded as one of our nation's most influential rabbis. A few years ago, Brous sat down to talk with Krista Tippett on the national public radio show On Being. Their discussion took place at a time like this, that is, during the high holy days of Judaism. At a certain point in their conversation, Rabbi Brous explains how the prayer of confession operates spiritually on Yom Kippur. You know, you sort of walk in, she said, and someone gives you a list of sins that you're supposed to publicly state that you committed. And this is intensely countercultural because all of our impulse and all of the norms of our society push us to deny and reject responsibility for the things that we're doing wrong. And this says, we did those things. Each one of us did those things. And even if you didn't personally do it, someone in this community did it. Asked for an example, the rabbi explained, we in Los Angeles live in a city with 86,000 people sleeping on the streets. And so, does that mean I personally am responsible for creating homelessness? Or does that mean that I'm responsible because I live in a society that allows certain people to remain in positions of privilege and power and to turn a blind eye to people who have tremendous suffering in their lives? And so how can we start to take ownership and responsibility of some of the terrible problems that are happening in our society and in our world? She admits that most of those who participate in her Yom Kippur services start by acknowledging and taking responsibility for the little things that have happened in their lives, the little ways in which they've made mistakes. But for those facing this confession with courage, a transformation takes place. Says Rabbi Sharon Brous, by the end of Yom Kippur, your soul is on fire because you start to recognize that it's all connected. You awaken yourself, or you open yourself up to this much broader sense of responsibility. When we, as this congregation, speak of the entwining of spiritual and societal transformation, this is a clear example. The spiritual willingness to recognize our responsibility for the pain and brokenness in our community and in our world. To do more than point fingers and assign blame, to rant and rage, to recognize deep within our own souls that in a free society, some are guilty. but all are responsible.
Welcome to today's service. I'm Cindy Hostetler. I've been a member of this community for 5 years, and I'm serving this year as the co-chair of our Board of Trustees. We especially welcome guests and are pleased that you found us in this virtual location. If you are in the Charlotte region and would like to learn more about our community, I recommend a conversation with our membership coordinator, Kelly Green. You can initiate that conversation by emailing Kelly at kelly@uuccharlotte.org. Either of our ministers would also welcome the opportunity to talk with you. You can request that conversation in your email to Kelly. Again, to each of you, welcome. The thought of taking inventory of my life, acknowledging wrongdoings, and the need for many amends is terrifying. Sharing my shortcomings here makes me fearful and embarrassed. At this moment, it requires me to be vulnerable before all of you and then have this information posted to YouTube for an indefinite period of time. While I can easily say that I have no control over anything or anyone other than myself, actually putting those words into practice is something that I often forget to do. I most often react rather than act. I think about living my life with intention, but neglect the actions required to actually carry through with my thoughts. I was raised in a family with little and scraped my way to a more secure and bountiful life under the delusion that I had gotten to that place on my own. I failed over and over again to recognize the many privileges that helped me get where I am. I rant over the injustices of the world, usually not stopping long enough to move forward to put words and emotions into action to support the change that I want to see happen. I've become comfortable with the privilege of recognizing that there are disparities everywhere I look. What I am not really comfortable with is giving up what I know and have in order to make change. When I think of making amends, what comes to mind seems so small. Practicing kindness, expressing gratitude, listening, truly listening to others in order to meet people where they are and understand where they're coming from. Stopping the judgment I have about situations and people around me that immediately pop into my head during a conversation. There is so much chaos and violence and injustice in our world, and on some of those days when it seems to be too much, I have the privilege of not functioning very well. Those are the days when I need to do the most work on making amends, looking inward, and finding my own humility in order to effect the change I talk about wanting to see.
I'm grateful to Cindy Hostetler, not just for her candor and courage in leading us in today's service, but also for her willingness to serve along with David Reynolds as one of the co-chairs of this year's Board of Trustees. Though you don't now see our board members with their identifying name tags, I assure you that they are continuing to do the work of this congregation. I encourage you to consider dropping them a message of appreciation or support or encouragement as they continue to lead us in these challenging times. I echo again Cindy's warm welcome to each of you. And I encourage you, member and newcomer alike, to consult our electronic newsletter, Currents, where you can find out much more about the life of our congregation. You'll find there, for example, information about an exciting new series that the members of our adult religious education and spiritual development team have created, an opportunity for us to explore books together. Take a look at that. You'll find also there a listing of all of the volunteers who've committed their time and energy to this year's congregational teams. Thank you for supporting us in this way. We exist in part as a congregation to hold one another, to celebrate the high and happy moments of our lives, and to be present when life is challenging. And so it is in that spirit that we open our hearts and hold in our prayers Annie Flint, who is now recovering from surgery. We're aware that there are others of you in the congregation who are facing particularly acute causes for anxiety, challenges physical and emotional, challenges that are financial. We hold you with love and support on this day. Our love always extends beyond our walls. I lived for a short time in the city of Louisville, Kentucky. And there's a portion of my heart, there's a portion of our collective hearts there now. A city once again reeling and roiling with upheaval following the release of this week's verdicts. We hold with love the grieving family of Breonna Taylor, newly pained by these verdicts. We hold with appreciative support organizers and activists calling there, here in our own city, around the nation, and indeed around the world, for societal transformation. We join a grieving, grateful nation in expressing our appreciation for the life and for the witness of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. May her witness long live deep in the heart and soul of this nation, that inspired by her courageous witness, we may accept our own roles in creating that more perfect union to which she called us so boldly, so bravely, and so tenaciously. Rest in power, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Today, in a service focused on responsibility, there's an opportunity for each of us to practice. There are those who are part of this community who assume others will take the responsibility to be generous. Others will take the responsibility to pledge in the ways our stewardship team is encouraging us. Today, I invite each of us to consider the place of this community in our lives, in the way it has fostered friendships among us and brought us together, in the way it allows us to amplify our voices, to support our children and youth, to care for one another in need, to celebrate lives as they pass. Please join in supporting us as generously as you possibly can. And thank you for your support. As we come now to our time of meditation and aspiration, I invite you to settle in to wherever you are, to as much as possible to calm yourself, to deepen your breathing, to close your eyes. Let us hold silence, a deep, enveloping silence, quiet enough to listen, quiet enough to hear. In this silence, if we are attentive, we will hear the cries, the sighs, the anguish, the agony of the world, of our nation, of our larger community, of our own lives. Do you hear? Do you hear? Let us imagine for just a moment that we are responsible, able to respond. What is your prayer? your personal prayer for the world, for our nation, for our larger community, for yourself. Have courage. Have courage. Amen. And now for our closing words, lines from writer Annie Dillard. There is no one but us. There's no one to sin, not a clean hand or a pure heart on the face of the earth or in the earth. Only us. Unfit, not yet ready, having each of us chosen wrongly, made a false start, yielded to impulse and the tangled comfort of pleasures, and grown exhausted, unable to seek the thread, weak and uninvolved. There is no one but us. There never has been. Go with courage, my friends. Go with courage until we meet again.